So my question is, when you're teaching someone and demystifying all of these things within the diet industry, once they understand that they can check their own fuel gauge, do you also take like a holistic approach for what their life looks like as well, and be like, oh, okay, you probably shouldn't have bags of chips just sitting in the hallway or whatever, because you know you're going to eat them. Like, and I'm talking about personal experience for me. Like, I can't. My rule is, if I want to eat some sort of like chocolate or chips or trash, I have to go leave the house to get it. If it's too easy here, if I'm having a bad day, those are gone.
Well, okay, so yeah, so you've said a few things here that I think are relevant to this. So one is that I never tell people what they can and can't eat. That's not my job.
Right.
I want this to, in order for it to be sustainable, to be an inside out approach. So I teach them how to recognize the patterns that are occurring, the triggers that cause them to reach for certain kinds of foods or to have an inability to stop eating those foods once they start. And I teach them that all foods are permissible, all foods are allowed, all foods are options, and that when they are making choices for themselves, it's so much about balancing eating for enjoyment and eating for nourishment.
Hmm.
And when they get into a mode of restriction, deprivation, then binging on chips or sweets or whatever, they don't feel good. So
Right.
eating the right amount of food or the kinds of foods that nourish us is more about feeling good, not being good, which is why I stay out of the lane of telling people what they should and shouldn't eat, but I guide them to start to notice the effects of their choices so that they have their own built-in ability to make those decisions in the future.
Interesting. Okay, I didn't expect that. That's really interesting, because I wasn't at all saying that should be restrictive, as in like you cannot eat this. And for me, I definitely have, I don't know, I'll go for a gelato, I'll have chocolate this or whatever fairly often in my life, but I don't have it in the house because I know my own habits, that if
Mhm.
it's there and I'm bored or whatever, I'll be more likely to graze. As my mom used to say when I was living at home, you're like a grazing cow. You just eat all day. It doesn't. I'll just walk around.
Right?
And so I was wondering, are there any of those lifestyle sort of situations that you do advise of, or no? It's completely like how you
No, no,
feel.
no. Yeah, I'm not going to tell them not to keep foods in their house, but we go through a process where they start to figure out what works for them. So,
Huh,
what you're talking about here is what we would call environmental triggers versus emotional triggers.
right.
Environmental triggers is it's there. It's in my house. Even if I'm hungry, I'm more likely to reach for the chips just because they're there. If
Hmm.
they're not there, then I might take the time to peel an orange or whatever. I mean, you could use a bunch of different examples. And having food in your home that is highly palatable, like the kinds of foods you've mentioned, might be the kinds of foods we're more likely to reach for when we are bored or stressed or looking for some pleasure. So I understand your decision not to keep that in your house. And for some of the people I work with, that's a great choice for them at first. But we teach a process called fearless eating. And fearless eating is about not making foods the enemy anymore because of the things I talked about before. When we make foods good and bad, they actually gain power over us. We actually put them up on a pedestal that makes us think about them and crave them more than we did before. Now you obviously have a pretty healthy relationship with food. You've decided not to keep foods in your house, but you allow yourself to go out and have them when you really want them. And so that's not so much a challenge for you. But when I'm working with somebody who is binging on certain foods or isn't able to really nourish themselves in a way that's meeting their health needs or goals or whatever it is, then we really work on what is that relationship with food. What is and I know relationship with food sounds like a bizarre thing, but it's something that we interact with on a daily basis multiple times a
Sure.
day. It truly has an interplay with the way that we feel. There's a strong mood food connection and food mood connection. And so
Right.
helping people recognize that, we have an actual process that I take them through that helps them look at the decisions they're making around food so they can begin to clarify what's really happening. Am I binging on cookies because I deprive myself of cookies, or I'm thinking I'm bad and I'm not going to be allowed anymore?
Hmm.
Am I binging on cookies just because they're there and I didn't take the time to provide other food for myself? Am I binging on cookies because I actually have a big hole in my life of pleasure and that's where I'm trying to meet my needs? And do I need to take care of that instead?
Right.